The end of the year is here, and we are going over the top 24, hi Amber, cards of 2024 for Commander.
I'm Mia, and I just finished holiday shopping.
I'm BZ. I'm excited for Christmas, and so is Amber because she gets treats. And we are the Nitpicking Nerds, sponsored by CardKingdom.com. That's a website. You should go there because you can buy the magic cards that you want there. They're going to have them all, then they're going to ship them all to you, and you're going to go, wow, that was easy.
They have everything. They have precons. They have singles for Amber's 12-land stacks deck. They have supplies if you really need. So go check them out and use the link below because that will tell them that we sent you, and we'd really appreciate that. We're also sponsored by Dragon Shield, best sleeves of the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
If you use the code
NERDS
at checkout, you could save 5% of your real money tax dollars on your entire order, which includes their sleeve crafter, where you can put pictures of Amber onto your sleeves or anything else you really want.
Yeah, there's two categories, Amber and not Amber. Most things fall under the second category. We are also sponsored by Moxfield, but not yet. So settle down because it's coming and you won't be able to see it coming. And we have a Patreon. If you want to see more Amber, more Miso, more Nitpicking Nerd stuff in general, that's the place you got to head because there's exclusive, bonus, extra stuff on there. But we have our 2024 wrap up. We are going to go over every product that released this year and talk about our picks for the 24 best cards from those products. Just as a recap, because you probably don't remember all the sets that came out. We had Karlov Manor, Fallout, Thunder Junction, Assassin's Creed, Modern Horizons 3, Bloomburrow, Duskmourn, and Foundations. Nobody can remember all 8 of those. So many products, just tons of powerful cards, and I will say, nothing too oppressive or unfun.
This has been a very long year and a lot of product has been released between January 1st and now, but I'm super excited to review it, and it was really hard to pick because there were so many awesome cards that came out. Unfortunately, no cards from Fallout or Assassin's Creed made it onto this list. There were so many powerful cards this year that it didn't really crack it in terms of power. But we have some honorable mentions, which includes things that we find fun or things that just didn't make these top 24.
Yeah, my honorable mentions go to cards that very well could be some of the best cards that came out this year, but I haven't played with them or against them, so honestly, I have no clue. But, Doomsday Excruciator and Birthing Ritual, those are it for me. They could be great. They look really good, and I just haven't gotten to test them out, but they seem strong. But I don't want to say they're the best cards ever if I haven't played with them.
I want to see them in the wild. I haven't seen them either, and I'm really excited. So if you have a deck, you should definitely play them against us and see how we like it. My picks are Innkeeper's Talent and General Crete the Boltbringer. I feel like Innkeeper's Talent, every time I've seen it, has been anywhere from kind of annoying because, Ward 1 is pretty annoying if you just are playing counters to begin with, to anything where you're just getting a ton of counters and you're doubling them. That's incredibly powerful, and it always ranges to be pretty useful. We also have General Crete the Boltbringer. I think that this is great because it has impact tremors on a creature, and it really helps with goblin production, which loves to go really fast. I thought we needed one Foundations card on here.
Yep, so we're going to get into our list. We got 24 of 2024, the top 24. So number 24 is Hideous Taskmaster, a card that has risen in the ranks. Certainly for us lately, every time we see it, it just slaps. 6 in a red, 7/2 devoid. When you cast this spell for each opponent, you steal one of their creatures, and they gain Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1 until end of turn. And this has Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1. So you are throwing out 4 Annihilator with Haste. This is not a cast trigger, so you can't counter it. This guy is just amazing.
This is really impactful. I read it and I was like, ooh, 7 mana. That doesn't feel great to pay. I would really like to win the game for 7 mana. But this gets you very, very close. Not only do you steal stuff, and if you have sacrifice synergies, you can be throwing them away once you get those Annihilator triggers. But you're forced to, when you swing with them, which you will, they're forced to not only sacrifice something, but also maybe take a lot of damage. That's amazing. As BZ mentioned, the cast trigger is awesome. And just overall, this is a big, beefy body with Trample itself.
Yeah, the fact that it gives everything Trample, including it already has Trample, just turns this into like a fireball that you can also send at the player winning to annihilate some of their lands. Like, not the most fun card when you're on the receiving end of Annihilator 4 out of nowhere, but this card is amazing. It just played so well. Number 23, what do we got?
This is Bristly Bill, Spine Sower, 1 and a green for a 2/2. Whenever a land you control enters, you put a 1/1 counter on target creature. If you pay 3 green, double the number of 1/1 counters on each creature you control. If you're in green and you're ramping, especially with that landfall, getting that 3 green can be very quick. And just being able to consistently put counters on creatures on turn 2, this guy's really powerful, and we're not just talking about in the command zone.
Yeah, he's just kind of a problem. Bristly Bill's just really annoying. Yeah, these are all graded in the 99, so there's not going to be any, we're We're not talking about Bristly Bill as a commander, like we said. This card, I just feel like it does a lot. It costs very little mana, so it comes down pretty early. And it works in +1/+1 counters decks or in landfall decks and, a couple of the decks in between there. I just think it goes in a lot of homes, and we did not respect it enough when it originally came out. But Bristly Bill, you're on our radar.
Honestly, every single time I see him, I'm like, this is a problem. When I first read him, I went, oh, it's nice to put 1/1 counters on stuff. Maybe it only works in a 1/1 counter deck. This guy is powerful.
He's just annoying. We have him in our commander cube, and he might have to come out. He's like the best card in there right now. It's Bristly Bill, baby. Number 22, we have a land, Talon Gates of Madara. When it enters, up to one target creature phases out. It taps for a colorless, and you can pay 1 and tap it to add 1 mana of any color, or you can pay 4 and put it from your hand onto the battlefield. What a weird card. This kind of got on our radar because a couple of our CDH buddies were talking about this and how it's just really aggravating to remove a key creature for an entire turn. And I think the faster your games are, the more stronger your decks are, the more relevant this card is. I don't know if I'm super thrilled about the 4: put it out, but it is just better than if it didn't say that.
I have gotten my butt kicked by this a few times in CEDH, and it's the fact that it's just not interactable because it's a land that's coming down with its own ability. It's not a spell that you can counter. It's barely something that you can respond to. It's just really awesome, and that 4 is definitely a bit expensive for this, but if you do want that, very tight game plan where you need that type of instant speed interaction, if you're playing very, very high-powered games, this could be an option for you.
Yeah, there's a lot of boards where if you've got a bunch of mana, this can be your payoff because you can use bounce lands and your Cloudstone Curio type stuff to just keep returning it and just keep phasing out your opponent's creatures at instant speed. Kind of annoying. I like this card. We're going to be trying it out more in 2025.
Number 21 is a card I've been preaching all year. It's Unexplained Absence, 3 and a white for an instant. For each player, exile up to one target non-land permanent that player controls. For each permanent exiled this way, its controller cloaks the top card of their library. I know what people are thinking. 4 mana to hold up for an instant is a bit expensive, but being able to exile 3+ things, if you want to exile one of your own things, is very powerful. And more often than not, the permanent that they get cloaked is not something that they are going to want to turn face up, because it's just usually a land or a spell, and you can only turn up creatures. You can't get those ETB triggers. And overall, I just think that this has been very good for us. It's one of the only ways to get rid of the ring, too.
We've been playing this card nonstop, and we've resolved it many, many times. And I don't really recall too many times where people turn the thing that they cloaked face up. It's just not really relevant. That's kind of always been the case with Manifest Dread and Manifest and stuff. It's most likely just an unusable card or a creature that has an ETB that they don't want to flip up. So that I wouldn't worry too much about. It's basically like a triple reality shift, except it hits anything. And I've just been so happy with this card. I love Generous Gift. I'm definitely a fan of that card. But this is only 1 more mana to hit 3 times as many things. Plus, like you said, the added bonus of, hey, if you need a blocker and you want to exile your Clue or something, you can. It's optional. Just a fantastic card. We were surprised when we talked about this card and then the price went up. And then it went back down and we're like, no. This card's really, really good. I don't really care what the price is, but I want everybody to know that this card's great.
Oh, it slaps. I love this card. It's been so good, and holding up 1 extra mana for multiple exile type effects when Destroy doesn't even get around a lot of things anymore is really great. I really like this card.
3-for-1s are strong, and this is slightly better than a 3-for-1, so definitely play it. Number 20, we have Insatiable Avarice, black for a sorcery, but it has Spree, so you can add 2 mana to also search for a card and put it on top, or black to have target player draw 3 cards and lose 3 life. So mostly what you're going to do is play black, draw 3, lose 3. That's totally fine. Or in the late game, you pay 5 mana, go find your best card, and then draw 3, with that card being the first one that you draw. I think this is one of the only Thunder Junction ones, along with Bristly Bill, that made it on the list. I had no problems with Thunder Junction, but there's just some strong sets. MH3, what a set. But I think this is mostly a mono black card or a heavy black, maybe even a 2 or 3 color deck that really wants Urborg in play all the time. But once you have it, it's just better than Painful Truths. It's better than all those types of cards.
Yeah, I really do like the flexibility of this. 3 mana tutor, not the best rate. 3 mana draw 3, that's a pretty okay rate. But being able to do both if you have the mana for it, or one or the other, is a really nice payoff that I do like to see.
Yeah, this card's in a ton of decks right now. I think if you're playing black, heavy black, it's just a staple. Number 19 is another black card. What we got?
This is Bloodthirsty Conqueror, 3 black for a 5/5 flying death touch. Whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. This is just exquisite blood stapled onto a vampire that flies in the air. I have been looking for this type of payoff because it's always so thematic in the Edgar decks and wherever, where it's like, yeah, but this would be better on a creature because an enchantment just doesn't vibe with my game plan. And now we have it. Now you can do creature-based Sanguine Bond Exquisite Blood combos. This is great.
Yeah, this is a combo piece because there's only now 2 versions of this type of effect that even exist in Magic. There's a million of the other opposite that says whenever you gain life, someone loses life. So you pair any of those together, you're going infinite. On top of, I think this card is pretty reasonable. Like if you just put it in a deck, I think most of the time it'll be okay. The only thing I think that's holding this card back a little bit, because being a life gain outlet and a combo piece is very strong. Sometimes when you play this, you just die. You have to be really careful because once this is in play, there's no reason at all for your opponents to attack each other. Why would they do that when, from their perspective, the life totals just move around? They don't actually go down. So I think this makes you a huge target, but sometimes you can just back it up and win.
I mean, it's really like Exquisite Blood, too. I mean, it's the same thing. You're going to put it down. You better be winning at that point. You better not be at like 4 life and be like, please don't hit me. I really just want to gain some life. People aren't going to buy that.
Yeah, you're going to need blockers. And in Edgar Markov, this gives you a couple blockers, and it has Death Touch. I'm always going to forget that this card randomly has Death Touch. Number 18 is a very similar card, but for a totally different deck. We have Forensic Gadgeteer, 2 to blue for a 2/3. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, investigate. So we're making more artifacts. Activated abilities of artifacts you control cost 1 less to activate. That includes clues. So now they crack for 1 mana. This card, I think, basically automatic staple in any blue artifacts deck. Super happy about it. And very similar to the Conqueror, it has an infinite combo. If you throw Basalt Monolith in your deck, you can now untap it for 2 and it taps for 3. So, go infinite there. And then maybe you can start casting other stuff, play clues, use the mana. Whether or not you're going infinite, this card is fantastic.
Clues are so fine at 2 mana to crack them, but bringing them down to 1 mana is a very impactful change, especially if you're going to be casting a ton of artifact spells. Yes, you need to be a artifact heavy deck, and I mean very, very heavy deck, not just making treasures or something. But if you can actually get those very consistently, I think this is a great payoff. And don't worry about the infinite combo thing. It's still good besides that.
Yeah, it'll come up every once in a while. It's definitely like a more spicy way to take that card. Just play it anyway. I think reducing clues by 50% is huge. That just changes the math on everything. All of these cards are going to be better. You put this card next to an Urza and you're just in heaven. Every clue just pays for themselves now. It's like absolutely wild. Forensic Gadgeteer can definitely go off, but it is a little specific. It wants you to have like 30 artifact spells in your deck. Number 17, it's a card you love.
I think people are sleeping on this, and I don't know why. It's Spymaster's Vault. It's a land that will enter tapped if you control a swamp. It can tap to add black, or if you pay black and tap it, target creature you control connives X, where X is the number of creatures that died this turn. I think that this is a really great card, and a lot of people might read it as, I have to be aristocrats or something a little bit proactive, which is what we usually like to say when things rely on sacrifice or things dying to get the full effect. And that's true, and sometimes, but this is just Swamp Plus, if you want to think about it like that. If you're playing a lot of swamps to begin with, it will usually enter untapped, and then if you have the mana or a lot of things die, you can activate that last ability to get a bunch of counters or filter through the cards. I think that this opportunity cost is 0.
Yeah, you don't really have to be playing aristocrats. You just kind of have to be playing black. Even if your deck just has a couple kill spells, if you have a Soul Shatter in your deck, you fire that off. If you have 2 extra mana laying around, you get Connive 3. That's draw 3, discard 3. That's really, really strong. And you're also putting counters on whatever creature is the best for you. I think, forget synergy. I think this is just, like you said, a black staple. If you're a 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 colors, you just put this card in your deck and you're pretty happy. The only thing that this doesn't do that maybe it looks like it might on first glance is it doesn't really do anything after a board wipe. You can't get like 20 because most of the time all the creatures that were in play are dead. Maybe if you fire off Toxic Deluge, you kill everything, you keep the biggest thing, and then you're going to connive like 15. That's hilarious. I hope that works out. There's probably some cases like that, but mostly this is just a 0 opportunity cost staple that I'm surprised is like 50 cents right now.
I am so surprised because it actually went down from the time that we talked about it last. I think that this is a great card. But Card Kingdom is also the best place online to buy cards, including Spymaster's Vault.
Pick it up while it's still cheap because we're never going to stop talking about it. Number 16 is a sweet one from the Bloomborough Precons. It's Agate Instigator. 1 in red, 1/3. It's got Offspring, 1 in red, so you can make a 1/1 baby copy of it. And whenever another creature you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. We've seen a lot of cards like this. Molten Gatekeeper was an example that didn't make the list. General Crete was on your honorable mentions. But I think this one really stands above the rest because it's 2 creatures. As soon as this resolves, you get 2 little mini threats. So it's twice as much damage as a Gatekeeper or a Crete, but it's also split in half. So even if they have a kill spell, you still have half a card. I think this is very comparable to Perforos. Perforos is obviously indestructible and sometimes not a creature and it can pump your dudes, but Perforos also does die to one removal spell, so there are cases where I'd rather have Instigator, but most of the time, you just play them both.
Instigator triggers itself, which is really nice. Being able to have the 2 copies is really nice, as you mentioned. And 1/3 has a bigger butt for 2 mana. This can work as an early game blocker, too, especially if you're working against something like, if you're worried about like a poison, creature coming at you early. This can really block against it. I think Agate Instigator is one of the best and most playable cards from Bloomborough.
And something we don't even talk about enough when we talk about this card, it has Offspring, which means it makes a token. So you can like make more of that token very easily. You populate, you paralyze, whatever. Then it starts getting like out of control. So some decks take this card and they just run with it, and you're going to lose if you see it. But most decks, it's just very, very good. Number 15, you're going to see any card that makes Field of the Dead better is probably going to be on my list somewhere, and Urza's Cave definitely does that. It's a land that taps for colorless, or you can pay 3 and tap it and sacrifice it to go find a land and just put it onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. I don't really like this card too much, hi Amber, because I think it's kind of uninteresting. It's just a free tutor. Like, what's the opportunity cost? Basically nothing. You just put a colorless land in your deck, and now it's a second copy of your best land, Field of the Dead.
It's so good. I love the fact that it comes in untapped. You can tap it immediately for mana. I feel like that's usually kind of the drawback. It's like, okay, well, this doesn't tap for mana, like all of the fetches in the world. But this is just, you have to pay a little mana into it, which is an okay rate to begin with. It fills your land slot, and it's good early or late game. Urza's Cave is so good that it's just like boring, as you mentioned.
It really is. It's so good it's boring. I do love Field of the Dead, and I do have this in my Field of the Dead deck, but like, what? Why does this card exist? I don't know.
Uncommon, too.
Yeah, it's such a good Magic card that is so easy to play, and it just makes every deck that you have busted lands in better than it already was. There's not even much else to say. It's Urza's Cave. How about a land that you really like that has a little bit more interesting?
This is so good. It's 3-3 City at number 14. It's a land. When you enters, you choose a creature type. If you tap it, you can add colorless, or if you pay 2, tap it, choose a color, add an amount of mana of that color equal to the number of creatures you control of the chosen type. I play vampires and I play elves, and this is just Nykthos for those. If you can spit out a bunch of little dummies instantly, you're going to get a ton of mana. I thought this was great. I think this is the most hyped card from Bloomborough for a commander, and I can see why. This is so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, it does take a little bit to get going. If you name Stinky Gremlin and you only have 1 amber on the battlefield, you're only going to make 1 mana. So you need to get to 4 of whatever creature type you choose to then start profiting, but the land enters untapped, and that was where most of the tension would be in terms of like, dang, should I play this? It's pretty free to play, and I love that it's basically just Nykthos for creature types. I think it's really cool. There's so many weird, wacky decks that this goes in. It helps boost up all of the terrible creature types to help make them a little bit more playable and make it so that you have a slam dunk. I'd even accept putting Urza's Cave in these decks because you got to find this awesome card.
It's so good, and there's so many token decks that just spit out things immediately. The humans, as I mentioned, the vampires, the elves, the slivers. So many things can just spit out creature types immediately, where getting 4 is not a problem.
Yeah, I mean, isn't this just an auto-include in every single Kindred deck that's like ever been made? Maybe with the exception of
Budget,
4 and
maybe?
5 colors, but even then you probably still play this, right?
I think so. This has been an amazing card for me. How much mana have I made out of this? Like 15 out of elves, for instance?
With elves, after a certain time, you stop counting. Once it's past 10, I'm like, you got infinite mana. You're just going to kill me. Moving on up our list, we have number 13. We're almost halfway done. Aven Interrupter, the white counterspell. 1 white for a 2/2 flash flyer, ETB, counter target spell. It becomes plotted. Spells your opponent's cast from graveyards or from exile cost 2 more to cast. So this play pattern works out with, they've tried to play a spell. Nope. Countered. They can't play it for the rest of the turn. They can play it next turn by paying 2 mana for it, assuming the Aven Interrupter is in play. And that is at sorcery speed. So some cards, not a lot, but some just get completely nullified. Because if your opponent casts a counter spell or something like that, and you counter it with Aven Interrupter, they're not going to be able to cast it at sorcery speed.
I like Aven Interrupter a lot. I think white is slowly getting heat, and I'm all here for it. White was one of the colors that was just not respected in Commander, and the fact that we're getting interaction like this, especially on creatures where if you have like Ephemerate in your hand, for instance, you can flicker it, comes back, and then you can exile a target spell again because this is an ETB trigger. I think this is a very cool card.
Yeah, and on top of that, you can just randomly destroy certain decks that are trying to cast spells from their graveyard or trying to cast spells from exile. Like, I have a Cascade deck, and I hope to God that I never see this card because I just will lose the game. If I try to fire off like a Maelstrom Wanderer or something, and they just go response, like, counter the Maelstrom Wanderer, it becomes plotted or whatever, and then all my Cascade triggers, I just don't do anything with them. Like, that is absolutely brutal. What a tempo swing. Aven Interrupter is just a slam dunk of a card.
I feel like this counters most of your decks. It's like, oh, graveyard, I'm done here.
Well, flashback, no.
I'm done here.
That segues perfectly into number 12, which is just, these cards are just going to be in all my decks that get hosted by Aven Interrupter, and it's 2 cards in one slot because we cheated. It's Aftermath Analyst and Lumra, Bellow of the Woods, because we literally just couldn't figure out which one of these 2 was better. They both got positives and they both got negatives. Aftermath Analyst is 1 and a green for a 1/3, enters, mill 3, 3 and a green, sacrifice it, return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield, tapped. And Lumra is 4 green for a star with Vigilance and Reach, power toughness equal to the number of lands you control, and when it enters, you mill 4, then return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield, tapped. They both do the same thing for 6 mana, but Lumra's way bigger, and it's all at once on an ETB, so it's potentially reusable, but Aftermath Analyst comes down early and lets you pay in installments.
I really like these cards. They have been so impactful every single time I've seen them. Maybe Aftermath Analyst doesn't get as much love because it is in installments and it doesn't get that big punchy, swingy effect that you get with Lumra, plus the big body. But I still think it's an amazing card. I've done so much work with Aftermath Analyst, and Lumra, it's just, oh, I'm doing all that, plus I have this gigantic creature I have to worry about now with Vigilance and Reach. That's a problem.
Yeah, Aftermath Analyst also fuels your early game because these cards are both good in either landfall or graveyard decks. They go in a bunch of different stuff. And Aftermath Analyst fuels your early game. It's like, oh, I need a creature in the graveyard for so-and-so. Cool. Good thing I milled 3 on turn 2 randomly. And then Lumra's like, hey, you want to flicker me or reanimate me or something? Like, let's go. Give me trample and I'll kill somebody.
These are so good, especially if you can like recur them, if you can like get an Ewit type thing and just keep doing it, sack your lands, bring them back. You can get so many landfall triggers. These can just win you the game provided you have a couple other pieces in play.
Yeah, they're both really good with fetch lands, and like you said, they're also really good if you can, this isn't average, but if you could sacrifice your lands, then these are crazy. But yeah, fetch lands are the main thing where it's like, oh, I could just crack my Evolving Wilds and my Verdant Catacombs, and then just do it again if I get these cards again.
These are so good, especially if you have Scoot Swarm, which is budget-ish now, which is amazing, on Moxfield.com. If you want to check the prices of anything that we have listed on here, you can actually plug it into Moxfield and see it on Card Kingdom or Redacted.
Yes, you can use inferior websites to check the price, or you could use Card Kingdom, but Moxfield lets you sort and tag everything in a very unique and helpful way. I like to use Visual Grid. That's just my style, but if it's not your style, there's plenty of other ones to choose from, so you're not shoehorned into your deck looking kind of rough.
You can even follow us on Moxfield. You can see our decks, and you can see every change that we've made to those decks ever. So go check out Moxfield, the best place online to build decks. But we are moving on to number 11. This is Marionette Apprentice. 1 under black for a 1/2 with Fabricate 1. Whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. This includes any creatures that can sack, any treasures, any clues, any whatever. This is great. It fuels itself because with the Fabricate 1, you actually get a body if you need a body. And this has just been so good for us. It comes down early enough so that, you know, it's not like Marionette Master where you have to wait till you build up a ton of mana. This can start working immediately. And then just with those early game tokens or creatures, if you're playing like Glimpse the Impossible or something and you get those Scions to sack for mana, this will start draining people very fast.
Yeah, this card, it's very simple. You know, it's one of the more simple cards on the list, and we were debating where to put it, or should we put it on the list at all? And then we were just like, Marionette Apprentice just slaps. Like, you know, I think it's better than Zulaport Cutthroat and a lot of those different cards. Maybe not better than Blood Artist, but I don't know. It's close. Giving you the free token is not something to overlook. Like, why does this card just come with a free token? This card is already very, very strong and one of the contenders for top aristocrat payoff without that. And they just let you get a free chump blocker. And that really matters in the early game. And of course, in the late game, when you're stacking up damage, like, it's just an extra point.
The fact that this is non-token makes it go so fast. I have it in my Mahadi deck, and being able to sack a bunch of tokens, treasure tokens, and then also sack a bunch of creature tokens is like, oh, everyone takes 15 actually. That's powerful.
Yeah, one of the ways that I see this card really go off is treasures. You don't need to be playing a treasure deck, but you stack up 4 or 5 and it's just like, You have Fireball on each opponent just for no mana. Definitely changes the math, whereas like a Blood Artist, you know a lot of what's going to happen. But with Marionette Apprentice, you can do stuff like make a treasure, do this, spend mana, and then because they're treasures specifically, you like get more mana to cast more spells, so it's actually more damage. Marionette Apprentice slaps. I think it's well-deserved in the number 11 slot. But that does bring us, of course, to the top 10 cards of the year. Got a couple different sets represented here. Number 10, Blasphemous Edict, 3 black sorcery. You can pay black instead of that 3 black if there's 13 creatures on the battlefield or more, and each player sacrifices 13 creatures of their choice. I love that of their choice feels like kind of a BM here because there is no choice. That's all of them for the most part. What a wipe. I mean, black has so many good board wipes already, and this is up there. I don't know if it's better than Toxic Deluge, but it is a good Magic card.
This is cheap. It's easy to get that 13 or more because this is among 4 players, so it's pretty easy. And the fact that it just gets around hexproof and indestructible, and it's just sacrifice, that is so many conditions that you are looping around by this cheap spell. We didn't need another black board wipe that is just awesome, but I'm happy we got it. This is just more flexibility, and we love a good removal spell.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably not better, like I said, than Toxic Deluge, because there are scenarios where there are not 13 creatures in play, like early game, and you're like, oh no, I got to catch up with a Deluge or something. But I just think any time after like turn 5, it feels not crazy to think that there might be 13 creatures on the battlefield. I mean, you just need, 3 each, and then 2 more somewhere.
I mean, there's always some decks that are storming off really, really early, too. It's like, oh, I'm playing this one, and it comes with a 1/1, or, oh, I'm playing...
Marionette Apprentice?
Yeah, or something. Or like, oh, I'm playing Elves, or something. It's like, I think it's very easy to say by turn 4 that there will be roughly 13 creatures on the board. I think that this can even qualify as an early board wipe in certain decks. If you're playing against Adeline, for instance, or something, this can go very fast.
But the other thing, too, is that this is not... Blasphemous Act, where you look at the 9 mana cost. This only costs 5. Even if there's not 13, this costs 5. You can play this on turn 5 if there are not 13 creatures in play. If you're getting run over and just go, okay, board wipe, that's totally reasonable. It's a board wipe that still gets around all that stuff, so I like it better than I don't know, Extinguish All Hope or Crux of Fate that just kind of says destroy stuff. Love Blasphemous Edict. I mean, there are also situations where if you're the heavy creature deck, you're the only one who knows you have this in your hand. Maybe you have 14 creatures in play. If you do, that's really good for you.
This is so flexible. I love this. The next card is number 9, which is actually 2 cards. It's Flare of Malice and Flare of Denial, some of the free spells of this year. Flare of Malice is 2 black for an instant. You can sack a non-token black creature rather than pay its mana cost. Each opponent sacks a creature or planeswalker with the greatest mana value among creatures and planeswalkers they control. And Flare of Denial says 1 blue instant. You can sack a non-token blue creature rather than pay its mana cost. Counter target spell. We love a good free spell, and we have admitted before that Flare of Malice is just a touch better in our opinion than Flare of Denial because black already wants to be sacrificing creatures for the most part. But being able to sacrifice your non-token stuff to get powerful effects is so good in Commander. It's such a good piece of interaction to be holding up and just spraying on people. They won't even see it coming.
Yeah, I do think Flare of Malice is considerably better than Flare of Denial, but we coupled them together just so we could fit more awesome cards on this list. There's so many cool cards this year. So Flare of Denial is a little bit worse. It's more niche when you can actually play it, but it's not the end of the world if you have to pay 3 mana to counter a spell. At least it's castable. Force of Will, that's a rough one. If you can't do the free alternate cost, you gotta pay 5. That sucks. But at least this one's 3, so it splits the difference. But Flare of Malice, oh my god, this is just another card that solidifies our stance that the going rate for premium black removal is in fact 0 mana because we have Flare of Malice, Snuff Out, Deadly Relic, and Lethal Scheme just leading the pack, and it makes me look at Infernal Grasp, and it's why would I ever want to cast this card? 2 mana, what a ripoff.
No, I don't want to play Murder, thank you.
No.
We have free spells, actually.
We have free Soul Shatter. I mean, I never thought that that's what this would do, that this version of the Flare would do that. It's just, this card has bailed me out of so many scenarios. It's so trivially easy to have a non-black or a non-token black creature, just an absolute unit, and it's only $3. So if you're going to go to Card Kingdom for anything, I would recommend going against Flare of Malice. What a steal for how good this card is played out.
These have been so good, and if I'm sacrificing a creature for this, I mean, I usually have creatures lying around, or if it's like something with Flare of Denial, I would rather counter, sack something and counter that spell rather than like lose the game or lose my board or something like that. It's a trade-off, but it's always a trade-off I'm happy to make.
Totally. And then part of the reason Flare of Malice gets a bump is when you go like, oh, I have to sacrifice something. Sometimes you're like, oh, I want to sacrifice something. So it's like, it feels like Lethal Scheme. The more creatures you have, the better the card is for some reason. It's like, oh, yeah, I'll just sacrifice this, get a bonus. Oh, trigger Marionette Apprentice. Oh, I draw a card off Grim Haruspex, and I spend 0 mana. Like, whoa. And it's good. It's really good. And I think also 4 mana Soul Shatter is not even a bad card.
Yeah, it's very playable if you don't have the creature to sack, but you usually do. I mean, I might hesitate putting these in like 4 and 5 color decks if you're worried about things like that, about actually having the creatures. But in 1 or 2, I think these are almost an auto include, if not an auto include if they play into your sub theme.
All right, it's time to eat our vegetables. These cards are very good, and we are not going to leave them out of the episode just because they have very small text boxes. Number 8, the Surveil lands. These are lands that enter tapped. They are typed lands. For example, Meticulous Archive is a land, Plains Island, so it's fetchable. Enters tapped, and when it enters, Surveil 1. These are like the premier tapped lands to go fetch for. They fill your graveyard. Unlike the temples, they are typed lands. Unlike the temples, these lands are very, very strong. They're not like absolute S tier, play them in every deck because they enter tapped, but I think I'm very happy to have them in most decks.
Am I odd to say that I like eating my vegetables in Magic the Gathering? I love it when a good new land comes out. I was excited for the Surveil lands, and they have played spectacularly. I'm super happy to have a fetchable, land plus where it's like, ooh, even though it comes in tapped, it does more and it's better than what we're usually playing in the tapped land slot.
Yeah, putting a card in your graveyard is huge for graveyard decks, certain land decks. A bunch of the cards we listed on this list already. Anything I'm playing, I would love to Surveil. It's so much better than Scry for a lot of different reasons. But number 7, more veggies. It's the Verge lands. Lands that tap for 1 color. And if you control for example, swamp or mountain, Blazemire Verge taps for black naturally, and red if you control a swamp or a mountain. And these are only in existence of the allied colors, and it's not a full cycle because there's no flip version of this that taps for red naturally. I don't know. This is a really weird land cycle. But these enter untapped and always make 1 color, and then the only question is, do they make both colors? And the answer is probably yes.
It was wild. These were actually the cards I was most hyped for Duskmourn because of the fact that I play so many colors in my decks that getting that land untapped, color fixing immediately, or like getting that land untapped and getting a color immediately and getting that second color and fixing almost immediately. And it doesn't even have to be a basic Swamper Mount. It could just be any type. So if you have a Surveil land or something, it can activate that second ability. I love these lands. I think the Verge lands are some of the best lands to come out in the last 5-10 years.
They're really solid. I think they're better. Like, these probably go in higher power decks in the Surveil lands, if that makes sense. Where, like, if I'm playing a green-white deck, I don't know what universe that exists where I'm not playing green-white Verge. I can't. Hauntwoods something. That Verge, I'm going to play it in every green-white deck I ever build forever. So I think there's definitely something to be said about that. Eat your vegetables. But back to some cool stuff. One of your all-time favorites from this year. I gotta let you read this one.
It's so good. It's Pick Your Poison. Green for a sorcery. Choose one. Each opponent sacks an artifact of their choice. Each opponent sacks an enchantment of their choice or a creature with flying of their choice. This is flexible. This is cheap. And I've killed multiple Soul Rings on turn 1 with it. Get it in your deck because it is great, and we love a good 3-for-1. And this is flexible too. Enchantments, artifacts, whatever. I would pay a single green mana to destroy a Rhystic Study even if it's the only enchantment on the field. But sometimes it's sack an artifact of your choice. Someone only has one very powerful artifact, and maybe you get a couple treasures or clues along the way. I'm happy with that. That's great.
And yet another card that gets around the hexproof and the indestructible can potentially snipe 1 rings. Like, it's possible. They have to have no other artifacts, but I mean, that's a lot more than Nature's Claim could say. We've just had so much success with this card, and there's a similar card that came out forever ago. I think it was called it was like 1 in a green instant. Each opponent sacrifices an artifact or enchantment. And this card is like 10 times better than that because it doesn't cast that wide of a net. So it says artifact. Everybody sack an artifact. There's no getting out of this if you only have 1 artifact. Everybody sack an enchantment, and I think the thing that really pushes this over the edge too, that makes it more usable in the late game, because obviously sacrifice gets worse as you go along and more things are in play, is the creature with flying. There's just not going to be a ton of those to where somebody plays their first scary flyer. This is just kill it. Like, you're just paying 1 mana. Sure, it's a sorcery speed, but it's 1 mana. And then you just kill their big flyer. Maybe you snipe a token or something from other people. It just does a lot. I find it's almost never dead, and especially enchantments. Like, if you're not playing against an enchantment deck, how many enchantments are they going to have? Like, ever, like 1 at any given time.
Yeah, I think this is like 1+. So it's like you're usually getting the what you want off the board, or you're just getting 3 things that are like pretty good, or you're just getting 1+ where it's like I'm getting the one thing, and then what if I snipe a Thopter or something? You're getting your money's worth because I'm paying green for Nature's Claim. I'd love to also pay green to get 3 things off the board.
Yeah, card's amazing. Even just like a mild situation where you snipe a Thopter token and 2 signets, that is so good for you. You're like time walking your opponents. They now can't ramp that signet's off the board for the rest of the game, and you've barely spent any mana. Take the rest of your turn. It's just a great card. What a house for 1 mana. And it's also like a budget card, so just play this everywhere.
It is such a gigantic tempo swing. You have to play this card. But we are on to our top 5 cards. These are our top 5, and they're super great, and we are playing all of them. Number 5 is actually a cycle. It is the MH3 MDFCs. We love a good MDFC here, and we talk about it a lot. One of our favorites is Disciple of Freyalise. 3 green for a 3/3. When it enters, you can sack another creature. If you do, you gain X and draw X, where X is that creature's power. The most important part of these is that on the land side, you could pay 3 life and they will come in untapped if you do. If you don't, it comes in tapped. But this is amazing. Usually on MDFCs, they come in tapped automatically, except for the mythics from prior. But at an uncommon slot, these are budget. These come in untapped, and you can put them in basically all of your decks. These are amazing, and they've played out awesome.
Yeah, look, we maybe could have had the MDFCs at number 1. I think that's a little uninteresting, and it's not fair to group them all together. This is basically just like any one of these, on average, 1 color MH3 MDFCs is just a fantastic, virtually an auto-include. MDFCs are kind of like Urza's Cave, where it's like, this is really, really good. Please stop printing it, because I think they're so good that this small category of like, I don't know, there's like 50 of them, that's a whole chunk of almost every commander deck that's ever been built or ever will be built again is like MDFCs. Like, oh, how many lands do you have? Oh, 30? But how many MDFCs do you have? Oh, you got 6 in there because they're just free to include. You just cut a forest for Disciple of Freyalise, and now you have what is mostly these MDFCs end up being a somewhat corner case card that is also a land, and you just bails you out, and you never have to worry about it being dead, because if you're flooding, it's a spell, and if you're land screwed, it's a land, and everything in between, just, they're unbelievable. They're so good. I feel like it's a meme to talk about it too much, but it can't really be overstated.
It does hurt deck diversity, but it is so useful, and as long as they're legal and as long as they keep printing them, I guess it'll hurt my deck diversity because I'm going to keep playing them.
I don't know how many MDFCs we play on average, but it's like 5.
At least 7.
The thing that was so surprising about this cycle is, when the first Mythic MDFCs dropped, I was like, oh my god, these are auto includes. Almost all of the MDH3 ones are just better than the Mythic ones, because the Mythic ones are like really big spells, like 7 or 8 mana, and they're hard to cast. This is like, hey, you want a 4 mana 2/2 that destroys an artifact or enchantment? The going rate is 3. I mean, yeah, I guess. Like, okay, do you want 4 mana kill a creature at instant speed? Do you want a 6 mana draw 7? Like, yes, I do.
The amount of time Amiria's Call is sat dead in my hand is most of the times that I've drawn it, but the amount of time that any MH3 MDFC is sat dead in my hand is slim to none.
Yeah, like Sink into Stupor. It's a 3 mana instant that can disrupt somebody. Ooh. We'll stop talking about it, I promise, because they're good, because you're a seasoned EDH player. But yeah, if you don't know about them, look it up. Number 4, another simple card, and this card is just kind of cracked. It was on our radar when MH3 came out, but I think the more I think about this card, just the sillier it is. It's Warren Soul Trader, 2 and a black, 3/3. Pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature, create a treasure token. I think Phyrexian Altar's power is very, 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 very good. It's one of the best free sack outlets, and this is like a twisted version of that, where to balance it a little bit, they said pay a life. That can be offset with anything, with any Blood Artist or Zulaport Cutthroat, to basically negate that. So it is a little bit of a downside, but it's easily avoided. And make a treasure is so much better than make a mana, though. There's so many extra ways to take advantage of that. It's a permanent, it's an artifact, it enters, it leaves. Like, this card enables some absolute machine gun turns where you just kill people out of nowhere.
Marionette Apprentice, Mirkwood Bats, Nadier's Nightblade. There are so many ways to take advantage of those treasures and those death triggers with Zulaport, Blood Artist, etc. Marionette Apprentice yet again. Really, there are so many awesome ways to use this. And as BZ mentioned, the pay one life is not that big of a deterrent.
Yeah, it's also just a combo piece. This is kind of like the most extreme version of Forensic Gadgeteer and Bloodthirsty Conqueror. I think that's the name of it. And it's just because it goes in your deck, but when you assemble critical mass, if you just have like 5 creatures in play, you might just win the game, because once you start getting things like Gravecrawler and Nether Trader on the field that just sort of recur themselves for very little mana, you just create infinite death triggers. All you have to do to offset the one life with a Blood Artist, and that's also your win con. So that does not require that much to just win.
I feel like with this card and like Pitiless Plunder, it's in the same category of like, oh yeah, that's out. Well, that needs to die or else I'm going to die.
Yeah, it could be anything. I don't even know what's going to kill me, but it's like, just pick your favorite. You fill in the blanks with Warred Soul Trader. It's such a powerful card. It could carry you to victories kind of by itself. I also like that since it is a treasure, even in response to a board wipe, you can sack your whole board, and instead of that mana going to waste, you just have 6 mana for your next turn. Like, okay, I mean, how mad can I be? What is the downside of this card? It's just amazing.
Yeah, and we have so much life when we start. I'm willing to use that for sacking creatures, getting treasures, stashing my mana, whatever, really. This is such a good card. Number 3, we're in the top 3 now. The bronze medal goes to Polywog Prodigy. 1 and a blue for a 1/3 with Evolve. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell with mana value less than its power, draw a card. This draws so many cards.
Yeah, as it stands, it doesn't do a whole lot because they will have to cast a 0-drop. Against me, it still works off my Mistress Baubles, but you're going to play Polywog on like turn 2 or 3. Then you're going to evolve it with basically anything that has more than 1 power. And now it's like, oh, it triggers off of 1-drops. Once you get to 2 or 3, either by, evolving this manually or just putting counters on it, because blue decks can do that a lot of times if you're paired with green. Now it's like, oh, whenever I cast like half of the non-creature spells in my deck, you draw a card. It's not optional. You just get to do it. I can't bail out of it by paying mana. This card has been frustrating. It's definitely a CDH like Rockstar, and I think it translates to casual where we play a lot very, very well.
I have this in my Galadriel deck, and that deck just will put counters on things just if you sneeze the wrong way, and it has drawn me so many cards in that deck. It's so, so good, and it's not like, Bant needed help drawing cards anyways, but this is definitely a great piece in that.
It's a total workhorse. We had it a little bit lower, certainly in our Bloomborough review. We're like, oh, this seems pretty cool. I think it was like number 4 or something. Turns out it's like the 3rd best card of the year. Probably the best, literally the best Bloomborough card. Definitely now that we've gotten to play with it, that has risen in the rankings quite a bit. But now we get to jump up to our silver medal, the 2nd best card of the year, a card I rant about anytime I have the chance. It's not Field of the Dead because that came out earlier. But number 2 is Archdruid's Charm, green, green, green for an instant. It's got 6 modes on it. You can search for a creature or a land and reveal it, put it onto the battlefield tapped if it's a land, otherwise put it into your hand, then shuffle. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control and have it deal damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control, or exile an artifact or enchantment. Sorry, 5 modes on this thing. It's just absolutely ludicrous what this card does for 3 mana. It finds your best land. That's like the default, I think, in the early game. It's also a kill spell for a creature if you have something lying around that's big enough. It even puts a counter on it to synergize with stuff or help your creature grow to the appropriate size to kill something. And obviously it just nukes any artifact or enchantment, including the problematic One Ring that we're super happy to kill.
Well, I don't know if you guys knew this, but when it says you can find a land, it can find Field of the Dead.
Wait, what?
I don't know if BZ mentioned that earlier, but it can actually find Field of the Dead or whatever you want, really, whether you need an Urborg or a Cabal Coffers or a Nykthos or really whatever. It is awesome.
Yeah, I think the only downside of this you could ever even come up with is the mana cost is a little restrictive, but I don't know. I just feel like in Commander, when we're talking about like 1, 2, and 3 color decks, I just feel like it's extremely easy to hit your colors when you're playing fetches, shocks, surveil lands, verge lands, or even just some of the simpler stuff like a bunch of tap lands that make the mana that you want. I don't find triple costs to be that prohibitive in a 1, 2, or 3 color deck, and especially in green when you have access to Yavimaya a percentage of all your games, because that card's just going to be in your deck. There's nothing this card doesn't do. At every single stage of the game, this card is cracked, and it's just so much utility. I don't even know what to think about this card. It's so good. I never would have thought that the green card in this cycle, after they gave us Archdruid's Charm, was just this amazing.
It's so flexible. I have seen you do work with this in your Belladros deck. I have done work with this just tutoring a creature late game or just finding my best land early game. Even if that's just a fixing land to make sure I get all of my colors. This card is so, so good. And being removal too, it didn't need to be, but it is, and I'm happy for that.
It's weird. Yeah, it could have just been green, green, green for the first mode. And I'd be like, wow, this is a really good modal card already because it can find anything. Any creature you have that kills a creature, this now can do that. It's just a toolbox card. And they just threw a bunch of other modes on it. So in the early game, worst case scenario, you're getting run over by something, exile it. Or bite a creature to kill it. Late game, mid game, the world's your oyster. This is the best possible card you could ever draw because it's just gets you out of any scenario. Or even just ramps you to just find, Field of the Dead or whatever your best land is. Archer's Charm's amazing. And we're going to go to number 1, the gold medal. Mia, what do we got?
This is Trouble in Pairs, a card that we did not rank as high as we should. It's 2 white for an enchantment. If an opponent would begin an extra turn, that player skips that turn instead. Whenever an opponent attacks you with 2 or more creatures, draws their second card each turn, or casts their second spell each turn, you draw a card. This is not restricted to once per turn. So if one opponent, casts 2 spells and another opponent casts 2 spells and that somehow happens on the same turn or something, you can still draw 2. And then if that player attacks you with 2 creatures, you're drawing again. This is so powerful and it draws so many cards. We did not think that it would be this powerful, or we were kind of like skeptical about it. We're like, ooh, we've seen things like Smuggler's Share not work out as well as we wanted to in the past, so we ranked this a little bit lower. No, this card's great. This card's amazing.
It actually performed, unlike all of those other, fake saviors of white. This is like such an amazing card. I'm really happy about it. I remember because I watched that video earlier. We were like, this card's probably good, but I've been hurt too many times. We gave it like number 9 or something. And I think that's fair because this could have easily, turned out like the rest of them because they didn't seem to know how to make white enchantments for a while. Like, oh, monologue tax is great. It's like, no, it's trash. But this feels a lot like Rhystic Study. I don't think there's a card in Magic that feels more like Rhystic Study where you just start going, wait, what is happening? And they just bury you in cards just from the game playing out. You have to kill this thing. But finding answers or pressuring the player who has it just lets them draw more cards. This Trouble in Pairs really did deliver. It is fantastic. It's well worth the like $35 or maybe like $25, $30 price tag. I
need another copy of this. This is such a good card. It's always impactful, and I am worried every time I see it.
And it's one of those cards that I don't think there's a deck I wouldn't play this in. This could even be, this transcends that. If you have a 5-color good stuff deck, you might just want to play this card. You can play it next to Rhystic Study. It's probably not literally better than Rhystic Study, but it's vibing alongside those best card advantage spells of the format. Overall, really happy with this list. I don't think there's been too much that came out this year that I was like, wow, this is going to be really annoying, or this is some kind of mass land destruction, unfun thing, but very powerful. No cyclonic rifts, really. Just a lot of like rock solid advantage pieces, cards I'm going to be scared of, but not cards I'm going to hate seeing. There was one blemish, but he saw himself out.
I think that the cards this year have been amazing, and even though there have been a lot of releases, it was still very hard to make this list because there were so many home runs this year. I am so happy with the card quality that I have seen coming out of products, and there were very few ones where I'm like, yeah, this actually isn't bringing much to the set.
Keep it up, and if you want to see more, maybe the top precons of 2024, that video is right here for you to click on right now.